The UK has one of the tightest labour markets among advanced economies. The unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest in almost half a century, and more people are employed than ever before. But that means finding the right job is hard, and the interview process can be even harder.
If a company has a 10% more difficult interview, that will result in that employee being 2.6% as an average more satisfied within that job.
So I'm here to be drilled by interview skills coach Elizabeth Connolly. Elizabeth, give me an example of a tougher question.
A very common question, which is difficult, is tell me about a time when you were working in a team, but there was conflict within the team. How did you help resolve that?
Well, Elizabeth, I'd say this is probably every day of my life, not so much in a team situation, but more in a one-on-one situation when I'm dealing with a script editor, for example. I write my scripts, I hand them over, then they will edit them, and often I don't agree with those edits. So then I'll have to go back, we have to negotiate a line, and usually we come to an arrangement where both of us are happy. If it's something that I really feel like shouldn't be changed, then obviously that's a harder situation to then resolve. But generally we reach a situation where both of us are happy. We'll find out how I went a little later. And while that may be a common question, companies are using much harder techniques now to find the right candidates, and they're throwing in some real curveballs.
How would your enemy describe you? What's the closest thing on your CV to a lie? Facebook have even asked it during interviews how many Facebook posts they have on Facebook each day. Even questions such as, how would you describe a vending machine to a person who's never used a machine before? How would you describe this company to your grandmother?
But I think the thing that throws most people is this new trend towards video interviewing. So it's a little bit like us having an interview today, but rather than seeing each other, you literally would have just sent me to a link. And on that link, I'd have had a text as the question, and a clock would come up and it would say, you've got 30 seconds to answer this question.
The whole process is getting longer as well. Glassdoor released a study into hiring practices around the world. Understandably, government interview processes are the longest at around 53 days. Hiring a professor takes over 60 days, and securing a job as a business systems analyst takes around 44 days. At the other end of the scale, hiring a waiter or delivery driver takes around 8 days.
This year, the top company to interview at was a company called Airbus, and although they had a high 90s in terms of interview approval, so that's job seekers rating that interview experience at the company, the duration of that interview was an average of 80 days. So although it was maybe a very long process for a lot of the jobs at that company, they're the best place to interview. People had a really good experience there.
So if you're heading into an interview situation, the experts advise to be informed. Do not over-prepare though by writing your answers down. Really know the company and the role you're interviewing for. Don't apply for something that's not a good match.
Have a look at salaries, have a look at company culture, have a look at the work-life balance at that company if that's important to you. Look at the photos, what it's like working at that company to get a real visual representation. If you do as much work as possible to see if you're a cultural fit for the company, then that will not only look good at the interview process, will come across well, but you'll end up knowing if you still actually want to work for that company.
I think the key thing is that you've actually got to be yourself. I think people try too hard to be perfect, and by being perfect, they give very perfect stories. They don't want to actually say that if they haven't got experience in one particular area or another. And I think by doing that, it's really difficult to build that rapport.
It is a tough question. So, how did I do?
What I like about it, Kate, is you gave me an example, which is exactly what you need to do. Okay, it was a little bit heavy in terms of that you were talking about the situation and you jumped from the situation to the result. And what we were missing really is what did you do? Because you talked about negotiating, but you didn't really tell me how you negotiated. All right, and that's really important. And I suppose ultimately I'm looking really for some depth, which would take about a 2-minute answer.
So if I think about looking for a new job, I'd probably need to schedule a few appointments with Elizabeth, or someone like her, before re-entering the jobs market. Katie Gregory for CCTV.